Today is the day of Transfiguration. It's with the snow outside. I put on our Westminster Facebook status that since childhood, I've always dreamed of a white Transfiguration Day, and now our dreams have finally come true. And at chapel, before school started getting canceled, when I did chapel for the preschoolers, I try to do my chapel lesson in a way that kind of follows the lectionary and what's going on in church. So the story was the story of the Transfiguration. And I asked, we have a holiday coming up on Tuesday. Does anybody know what it is? And all the kids were saying, Valentine's Day. And I said, yes. And also Chinese New Year on Friday. And also Mardi Gras coming up too. But then don't forget the day of Transfiguration, which is a high holy day. It is a feast day. We are celebrating communion today, and we had chosen today for a special outdoor worship service because it is always appropriate to have communion on feast days, on celebration days of worship. The liturgical color for today is white. That's why I'm in my white thermal shirt. The official liturgical garment for Zoom worship on Transfiguration Sunday. But I think most of us, even though if you grow up in a Presbyterian church or a Lutheran church or a Methodist church that follows the lectionary, you hear sermons on Transfiguration. It comes up every single year. It's a big deal. It's a bigger deal in kind of the Eastern Church, Coptic, Byzantine, Orthodox churches. But it's not that big of a deal for most of us. It's only, one of those Bible stories that maybe we've just kind of vaguely heard of, even though we hear it every year. If you sort of regularly go to church, you have Easter and Christmas Christians. You don't necessarily have Easter, Christmas, and Transfiguration Christians. And as an aside, perhaps, if you were going to overly materialize or commercialize a holiday, I mean, you have a cloud, you have sort of radiant white, light. The Transfiguration seems like it would be right for, something really dazzling, but we haven't exactly made it there. But I think it's interesting to think about the Transfiguration kind of right now in this time, and especially I'm thinking about sacraments because our Sunday school class was about sacraments, because at the end of the day, what the Transfiguration is a mystery. And I could go on and sort of tell you about the context in Mark's gospel and the way the Transfiguration is sort of this midpoint in Mark's gospel, where the first half is kind of all of these miracles, and the second half is about how Jesus is going to sort of suffer and die. And the Transfiguration, coming right before Lent, is this sort of reminder that Jesus really is God. Jesus really is divine. This is sort of the glimpse of the Easter resurrection, before it happens. But I think that is a way to try and kind of domesticate the Transfiguration and domesticate God. As sort of Christians of the Reformation, Presbyterians, we like our words. We seek to understand everything. We have long books about theology and who God is. If you were to ask most of us who were, elders or kind of regular Sunday school going Presbyterians, what is the most important part of the worship service, we would say the sermon, or perhaps, the reading of scripture. If you can't have You can't have worship without a sermon, or you can't have worship at least without scripture, at least without these words. And if you were to ask Christians, especially, pre-Reformation and in other traditions, what the most important part of worship would be, or even a Roman Catholic now, they would say, well, you can't have worship without Mass. You can't have worship without the sacrament. You can't have worship without this sort of tangible experience of God's grace, of meeting God in the bread and in the cup. And what the word sacrament means is mystery. And I think that is where we are going now as a church. We're realizing that we have tried to sort of control and kind of systematize theology and systematize God in the same way that, in the course of modernity, we've tried to understand and sort of systematize and control everything about our built environment, about our world. But the very nature of God is that God resists that control, that God remains in control in a way that that we just cannot fathom. You can continue taking communion, continue, remembering your baptism week after week after week, and never understand it. We can hear sermons about the Transfiguration every year for the rest of your lives, but still never understand it. That it is always something that is going to be, in the end, a mystery. And so the part of the text that really stands out for me this week is the fact that the disciples, and he just sort of takes the inner sanctum of disciples, Peter, James, and John, with him on the mountaintop. In all three synoptic gospels, so Matthew, Mark, and Luke are the synoptic gospels. This story is in all three of them. And in all three of them, it's slightly different, but in all three of them, it says, it goes out of the way, at least in Mark's, to say that they're alone, that there's nobody up there at the top of the mountain but them. But then when it happens, they are terrified. And if you have heard a sermon on the Transfiguration before, a lot of sermons on the Transfiguration talk about, mountaintop experiences, talk about, being in thin places, maybe at a place like Gilmont or a place like Mo Ranch, a place of natural beauty where you've been kind of taken out of your routine, taken out of your normal surroundings, and then there you have this mountaintop experience. You have this wonderful experience of God, where sort of you gain understanding, you gain kind of a sense of God's love in a way, again, that is beyond kind of words. And that's what we compare to the Transfiguration. And I think, there's something to that, but the disciples are terrified. Like, this isn't just, oh, we had worship on, Chapel on the Hill at Mo Ranch, and the communion was nice, and the hill country was beautiful, and, the wind was blowing in my hair, and I had this sense that, God was with us. No, I mean, this is Peter, James, and John are with this guy, with this person that they know, that they've been getting to know. Peter's just said that Jesus is the Messiah. This is their teacher. They are all by themselves on the top of the mountain, and all of a sudden, this person that they know, that they're friends with, that they have, broken bread with, is just utterly transformed and is so completely, this is not who they thought they who they thought he was. And it's like they think they're gonna die. They are in the presence of God and they are just utterly terrified that this is a mountaintop experience, kind of not necessarily like a trauma, but what makes it memorable is that they are absolutely terrified because this person that they thought they knew, they have recognized is totally different and powerful and holy in a way that they cannot comprehend or understand. And I think about when something scary happens. Um, a lot of times, if in the midst of the craziness that is life, right now, in the midst of COVID, in the midst of this crazy cold snap, in the midst of, the impeachment hearings and our political situation that just feels totally alien and foreign to anything that we have ever experienced before, what we go back to saying, our sort of standby phrase is, well, God is in control. And that is what comforts us. Well, God is in control. God is in control. God is in control. And I think that's true. But I think most of the time when we say that, the subtext is that God is in control, but the God that is in control is this God that we know, is this God that's our God. It's this God that we belong to. And so it's like, because God is in control and because we believe in Jesus, we have this, claim, we hold stock in God, and we believe God is in control. That means kind of, we're sort of in control too. That we're gonna be fine. And the message of the Transfiguration is that if God is in control, sometimes that's the opposite of comforting. That is absolutely terrifying, because that is what was happening to Peter and James and John. They recognized right then in that moment that God was in control and they had no flipping idea what was going to happen next. I have I've started this relationship with a mentor, a clergy coach who specializes in transitional ministry. And I know recently I haven't been sort of saying that I'm the interim pastor at Westminster Presbyterian Church or the transitional pastor at Westminster Presbyterian Church, but that is true. I am the interim pastor at Westminster Presbyterian Church, and it is. I have the tasks of transitional ministry that are sort of, part of my job description. And so I'm talking with this mentor, and he says that, all ministry is transitional ministry because of the state of the world and the church right now. And even transitional ministry, kind of as a profession, is in transition. It used to be that the job of a transitional minister or an interim pastor was to go into, the church context and to assess what the needs were, assess what was going right, but especially to assess what was going wrong, to find out kind of what the problems are, where are the problem areas, and then to come in and fix those things and provide solutions. And that's very much, I think, again, going back to the world at large, that's very much what we look for, when we listen to TED Talks, or when we watch our favorite, people on our favorite, commentators on the news, or opinion columnists. These are the people that can just use words beautifully and kind of say, well, this is what's going on, this is what's going wrong right now, and what we need to do is this, and this will make it better. And that's been the job of transitional ministry too. And he's saying now we're thinking that the job of transitional ministry is to lead the people to a place where nobody knows what is going to happen, to where it seriously feels dangerous, because that is where God is in control. That is where the Holy Spirit shows up. And as I look at kind of the state of the church right now, and the state of, the world right now, and what happened on January 6th at the Capitol has been on my mind because of, the impeachment hearings, and, the way that these were church people who did these things. The church right now is desperately, desperately seeking to be in control. We want so much in this world that feels different and that feels out of control, to be able to go back to this sanctuary, to go back to the hymns and the prayers and the settings that we know, and to just have this rock, to have, this faith and this God that we've always known, that is the shelter in this storm. And we want to sort of assert that institution in whatever way we can. And that is why religious fundamentalism is becoming so widely sought after right now, because it offers answers. It offers black and white, this is why this is happening. We're in the end times. Don't be afraid. We're in the end times. Don't be afraid. God is in control. This is, it feels like you're out of control, but this is exactly, what's going to happen. All you have to do is, believe. And that's a way to sort of feel comfort. And so what does it look like to say that God is in control, but to not say that as a way to kind of try and claim power, try and claim sort of institutional relevance for ourselves? What does it look like to say that we are going to intentionally put ourselves in a place where we are utterly dependent on a God who really is a mystery? We could be in the end times, we could not be in the end times, because God is in control. We are not. It is a mystery. It reminds me of C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia, where they're asking a question about Aslan, and they ask, well, is Aslan safe? And they say, no, Aslan is not safe. Aslan is not safe, but Aslan is good. And if we are in the presence of Aslan, and we believe as we do that we are sinners, that we are not, we may be beloved, but we are also part of the problem, part of the web of sin that we are all trapped in. If Aslan is good, that doesn't always mean that we are safe. And we're striving so much for control and power and safety right now. And I think Westminster and the church in general is being asked to go and be on that mountaintop with a mystery that is utterly terrifying, that is wholly other, that might take us to a place where we could literally or figuratively die. And that is where God shows up. And worship is practice for that. Being church together like this is practice for that. I've kind of intentionally tried to make this a more informal worship service that's different from what we're used to, so that we can be out of our routine, so that we don't have a sense of control or what is going to happen. And so I am going to now stop talking for a while and at least take a few minutes to see, in the context of worship, what you all think about that and your own reflections, we have a small enough group to where if there is something that you would like to sort of say or to reflect on, or if you would just like to sit in silence, there's an opportunity for that now. And I don't know what's going to happen. I am not in control. And I'm a little bit terrified right now.
It is interesting to think about the transfiguration, the word itself, and then the expectation, the don't know what's happening, the fear. It's kind of definitely very appropriate for our church right now, and it does really kind of put it back to a personal level of what do I see, what do I hear, what do I do.
Yeah, thank you.
Anna's made a comment in the chat box.
Yes, Anna says that I think this really relates to faith being the opposite of certainty too. Yes, which is what we talked about last week, that faith is realizing that we cannot be in control, and that if God is in control, at times maybe that's comforting, but that should also be a little bit terrifying.
I'd like to say that I agree. For me, I have my moments of being terrified and afraid, but I think that for me, I just have to have that faith and do everything I can to be positive and loving to people I come into contact with every day.
And so focusing on the things that we can control, which is our own love and our own actions. Absolutely. Yeah. Because I think that when we realize that, to go back to kind of this strain of Christianity that's fundamentalist and that is even, prone to violence, I think that is where we go when we feel out of control. We go into fight or flight, and we go into sort of defense, sort of any means necessary, to kind of defend the God that we claim is in control. But what we can control is our own response to not give in to that temptation.
Well, I think I mentioned this once before, but I was hired by a friend to run camera and we were shooting a video for a business conference, and the person we were shooting in the scenes was Art Linkletter. And he was telling us a story about how he was interviewing Phyllis Diller, and she asked him if he wanted to know how to make God laugh. And she said, sure. And she said, tell him your plans.
Sure. Absolutely. We plan and God laughs.
I do want
I
to
think-
say that I am thankful I got my heat back on.
Yeah.
Well, and that was the other sort of, as I was jotting down notes for this sermon, that was the other kind of, I think the snow is so kind of appropriate for today, because the snow is beautiful and it takes us out of our routine, and it forces us to, stop what we had planned, stop what we had planned and just let God be in control. And I think that that's why it's so sort of God is in control, and that's why we ended up with this for our Transfiguration worship service. But again, I think if we're going on sort of the real meaning of the Transfiguration, it is, well, we have this snow and ice, and if there were a power outage, if you were stranded in your car, it would feel a lot less sort of beautiful and serene and domesticated, and a more like, okay, God is in control and this is absolutely life-threatening and terrifying.
I think the world today, we face more uncertainty now than I think we ever has. At least it's more uncertainty than I've ever faced before. We all, I think, look forward to the times when we can go back to the way it used to be. And because we know that's comfortable to us and reassuring, but we don't know when that's going to happen, if that's ever going to happen. So if there's ever a time when we have to put our faith in God and trust Him in knowing that we don't know what's going to happen. And, this is that time, and I think the sermon, the Transfiguration sermon is perfect. Kind of fit the kind of day we have today and the kind of times we're in right now. We're not in control. We don't know what's going to happen. All we can do is trust God.
And I'm not going to wrap it up. In a bow for y'all today and sort of say, well, God is in control. that if you are going from here with a sense of fear, or with feeling uncomfortable about the world, about the church, about life, about faith, maybe you're in the presence of Aslan. Maybe you're right where you should be today.